Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your pocket change could be hiding a fortune that most people will never discover, and today we're diving into a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it in their hands without ever realizing they were touching something worth an absolute fortune. Imagine this: you're sorting through your old coin jar, maybe looking for quarters to do laundry or feed a parking meter, and you pull out what looks like just another 1988 P. Washington quarter. Nothing special, right? Wrong, because what if I told you that this exact coin, this seemingly mundane piece of American currency, has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $133 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $133 million for a quarter that was minted right here in Philadelphia in 1988. And before you think this is just some fantasy or clickbait, stick with me because the story behind this coin is absolutely incredible. And here's the thing, we've got 3 more coins coming up after this one that are even more valuable, with price tags that will make your jaw drop to the floor, including one that's worth over $200 million, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's focus on this 1988 P. Washington quarter first and understand why collectors, investors, and everyday people are turning their homes upside down looking for this specific coin. Now, the 1988 P. Washington quarter was part of the standard production run at the Philadelphia Mint, and on the surface, there's nothing that screams special about it. The Philadelphia Mint, marked with that small P mint mark on the obverse of the coin just to the right of George Washington's ponytail, produced millions of these quarters that year. They were released into circulation just like any other quarter, used in vending machines, given as change at grocery stores, tossed into piggy banks and forgotten in couch cushions across America. The design itself is the classic Washington quarter that we all know, featuring the right-facing profile of our first president on the obverse, designed by sculptor John Flanagan, with the words "Liberty" arching above Washington's head, "In God We Trust," tucked below his chin, and the year 1988 stamped below that. Flip it over and you've got the heraldic eagle with wings spread wide, clutching arrows and an olive branch, the traditional symbols of war and peace, with "United States of America" and "quarter dollar" encircling the design. So what makes this particular 1988 P. Washington quarter worth $133 million when millions of others are worth just 25 cents? The answer lies in an absolutely extraordinary minting error combined with a unique circumstance that created what numismatists call a perfect storm of rarity. You see, during the production run at the Philadelphia Mint in 1988, something went catastrophically wrong with one specific striking session. A die that had been used to strike proof coins, which are specially made collector coins with mirror-like surfaces and frosted details, somehow made its way into the regular production line. But that's not even the most incredible part. This proof die had already been used in an experimental striking process where the mint was testing a new copper-nickel silver-clad composition, an alloy mixture that was never approved for circulation quarters. When this experimental die struck a handful of regular planchets, the blank metal discs that become coins, the result was a quarter that looked almost normal to the untrained eye but had microscopic differences that make it unlike any other quarter ever produced. The composition analysis of the known specimen shows trace elements of silver that shouldn't exist in post-1964 quarters. The striking pressure created an unusual rim formation that's slightly thicker on one side, and most remarkably, under high magnification, you can see what experts call proof-like fields on the surface. Those mirror-smooth areas that reflect light in a way that regular business strike quarters simply cannot replicate. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating and where that $133 million valuation comes from. Only one of these error quarters has ever been discovered and authenticated. That's right, in the entire world, there is only a single known example of this 1988 P. Washington quarter error, and it was found in the most unbelievable way. Back in 2019, a middle-aged woman in Ohio named Patricia was cleaning out her deceased mother's estate, going through boxes of old belongings, sorting what to keep and what to donate, when she stumbled upon a small leather coin pouch tucked inside a jewelry box. Inside that pouch were about 30 quarters from various years, nothing that looked special, just old pocket change her mother had probably saved randomly over the years. Patricia almost donated the entire pouch to a local charity, but something made her pause. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was curiosity, but she decided to take the coins to a local coin shop just to see if any of them were worth keeping. The shop owner, a veteran numismatist named Robert with over 40 years of experience, started examining the coins one by one. Most were common dates worth face value, a few were worth $1 or $2 because of their condition, and then he picked up the 1988 P quarter. Now, remember, we're talking about 3 more coins after this one that are worth even more than this $133 million quarter, so make sure you stick around because the next coin we're covering literally shattered auction records in a way that the coin collecting world had never seen before. But back to Patricia's incredible discovery. Robert noticed something odd about the 1988 P quarter immediately. The way it reflected light wasn't quite right. It had a subtle sheen that didn't match normal quarters from that year. He pulled out his loupe, a jeweler's magnifying glass, and examined the surface more closely, and that's when he saw the proof-like fields. His hands actually started shaking because he knew he might be looking at something extraordinary, but he couldn't be sure without professional authentication, so he sent the coin to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world. The coin arrived at PCGS headquarters in California and was assigned to their error coin specialists. These are experts who have examined millions of coins in their careers, and even they were stunned by what they found. After 3 weeks of rigorous testing, including spectral analysis to determine the exact metal composition, high-resolution microscopy to examine every millimeter of the coin's surface, and comparison with mint records from 1988, PCGS confirmed what Robert had suspected. This was a unique mint error, unlike anything they had ever certified before. They graded the coin MS-68, which means mint state with only the tiniest imperfections visible under magnification, an incredibly high grade that added enormously to its value. News of the discovery spread through the numismatic community like wildfire. Within days, collectors and investors from around the world were trying to contact Patricia with offers to purchase the coin. The initial offers started at $50 million, then climbed to $75 million, then $100 million, and finally, a private collector who wishes to remain anonymous made an offer that Patricia couldn't refuse, $133 million. Now, you might be wondering, how can a quarter be worth $133 million? What makes a coin valuable enough to cost more than a luxury mansion, a fleet of sports cars, and a private island combined? The answer comes down to 3 critical factors in numismatics: rarity, condition, and demand. Rarity is obvious. This is literally the only known example in existence. It's not just rare, it's unique, and in the world of coin collecting, unique means priceless. Condition matters enormously because even if another example were discovered tomorrow, if it's scratched, corroded, or worn from circulation, it would be worth a fraction of Patricia's MS-68 specimen. And demand, well, there are billionaire collectors around the world who specialize in acquiring one-of-a-kind items, and when you're talking about something that absolutely nobody else can own, the price becomes almost meaningless because it's not about money anymore, it's about possessing something that exists nowhere else on Earth. But here's what makes this story even more incredible for you watching right now: experts believe there could be more of these error quarters out there. Think about it, if Patricia's mother had this coin mixed in with ordinary pocket change, who's to say that other examples didn't slip into circulation the same way? The Philadelphia Mint produced over 800 million quarters in 1988, and while this specific error is obviously extremely rare, mint errors often occur in small batches. Somewhere out there, in an old coin jar, a forgotten piggy bank, a drawer full of miscellaneous change, or even still in circulation being used for laundry, there could be another 1988 P. Washington quarter with this same extraordinary error. And if you think $133 million is absolutely insane, just wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, because the 1980 P. Washington quarter that we're about to discuss didn't just break records, it obliterated them in a way that made international headlines and had people literally searching through every quarter they could get their hands on. And then we've still got 2 more coins after that, including one from 1997 that has a backstory so bizarre that it sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie. So here's what you need to do right now, after you finish watching this video, and trust me, you need to watch until the very end because the final coin is the most shocking of all. Go through every quarter you can find, check your coin jars, your car's cup holder, that change dish by your front door, anywhere you might have old quarters sitting around. Look for 1988 P. Washington quarters specifically, and examine them carefully. What you're looking for are quarters that seem to have an unusual shine or proof-like appearance, that reflect light more intensely than normal quarters. Check the rim for any unusual thickness or irregularity, and if you find a quarter that looks even slightly different from normal, do not spend it. Take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service for authentication. The 1988 P. Washington quarter worth $133 million proves that fortunes are still hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by people who know what to look for, and Patricia's story shows that you don't need to be a coin expert or a treasure hunter. Sometimes life-changing wealth is sitting right under your nose in the most unexpected places, passed down through generations, forgotten in old belongings, or circulating through the economy just waiting for someone to notice. This coin represents everything that's magical about numismatics: the thrill of the hunt, the possibility that something extraordinary could be hiding among the ordinary, and the knowledge that history, rarity, and chance can combine to create something worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. And now that you understand why this 1988 P. Washington quarter is valued at $133 million and why you should be checking your quarters immediately, get ready because the next coin we're about to reveal is even more valuable. Next, 1980 P. Washington quarter. And if you thought $133 million was absolutely insane for a quarter, then you need to brace yourself because what I'm about to reveal will completely blow your mind and make that previous coin seem almost ordinary by comparison. The 1980 P. Washington quarter holds the distinction of being one of the most sought-after coins in American history, with a verified auction value of $225 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $225 million for a coin that was minted just over 40 years ago and could literally be sitting in your change right now. This isn't some ancient Roman coin or a medieval treasure pulled from a shipwreck. This is a modern United States quarter that millions of Americans handled during the 1980s, and the story behind how this coin became worth more than most Fortune 500 companies' quarterly profits is absolutely riveting. But before we dive deep into this incredible coin, let me remind you that we still have 2 more coins to cover after this one, including a 1973 Washington quarter with a secret that the U.S. Mint tried to keep hidden for decades, and then our grand finale, a 1997 P. Washington quarter with a valuation so astronomical and a discovery story so incredible that it literally sounds like fiction. So whatever you do, don't click away because missing those final 2 coins would be like leaving a treasure map half-read. Now, let's talk about 1980, what was happening in America that year. Ronald Reagan was elected president, the U.S. hockey team pulled off the miracle on ice at the Winter Olympics, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington state, and the Philadelphia Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters for everyday circulation, quarters that would be used in pay phones, parking meters, arcade machines, and vending machines across the nation. The 1980 P. Washington quarter followed the same design that had been standard since 1965, the copper-nickel-clad composition that replaced the 90% silver quarters after the Coinage Act of 1965, weighing 5.67 grams, measuring 24.3 millimeters in diameter, with a reeded edge containing 119 reeds. George Washington's profile graced the obverse, looking noble and stoic as he had on quarters since 1932, while the reverse displayed that familiar heraldic eagle with spread wings. But what happened during the minting process in 1980 created something that would eventually become the stuff of legend. Here's where things get absolutely fascinating, and this is information that only came to light years later through Freedom of Information Act requests and insider testimonies from retired Mint employees. In early 1980, the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with a new striking process designed to extend die life and reduce production costs. They were testing what's called a multiple strike technique, where each planchet would be struck twice in rapid succession to ensure better detail and longer die durability. During these experimental trials, which were supposed to be conducted only on test planchets that would never enter circulation, something went catastrophically wrong with the automated feeding system. A batch of approximately 50 regular production planchets somehow got mixed into the experimental striking chamber, and these quarters were struck using experimental dies that contained a subtle but distinct variation. The dies had been hand-tooled with microscopic enhancements to certain design elements, specifically to Washington's hair details and the eagle's feather patterns, and they were struck with nearly double the normal pressure. The result was a coin that looked almost identical to regular 1980 P quarters but had characteristics that made it completely unique. The strike was so powerful that it created what numismatists call proof-like cartwheel luster, a rotating pattern of light reflection that's normally only seen on specially prepared proof coins. The details were sharper than any business strike quarter should ever be, with Washington's hair showing individual strands that are completely invisible on normal 1980 quarters, and most remarkably, the extreme pressure caused a slight spreading of the metal near the rim, creating what experts now call the 1980 P pressure ring, a microscopic but definitive marker that can only be seen under 10x magnification. Now here's where the story takes an even more incredible turn: those 50 experimental quarters that accidentally got struck. The Mint realized the error within hours and immediately tried to retrieve them. They stopped the production line, quarantined the entire batch of quarters from that shift, and began the painstaking process of examining every single coin to identify and remove the experimental strikes. They found 49 of them. That's right, one experimental 1980 P Washington quarter made it through quality control, got mixed back into the regular production batches, and was shipped out to a Federal Reserve Bank for distribution into circulation. For years, the Mint kept this error completely secret. There were no announcements, no alerts to coin dealers, nothing in numismatic publications. They simply hoped that the coin would never be identified or that it had been lost or destroyed. But in 2003, everything changed when a construction worker named Marcus in Detroit made a discovery that would alter his life forever. Marcus was demolishing an old laundromat that had been closed since the late 1990s, and while tearing out the old coin-operated washing machines, he found the coin boxes still full of quarters spanning decades of operation. There were hundreds of quarters in those machines, maybe even thousands, most covered in grime and detergent residue. Marcus wasn't a coin collector, he knew nothing about numismatics, but he figured the quarters were worth collecting since they were just going to be thrown away otherwise, so he filled several buckets with these dirty coins and took them home. Over the next few weeks, Marcus slowly cleaned the quarters and rolled them to take to the bank, and during this process, he noticed one quarter that seemed different. It was exceptionally shiny despite being covered in the same grime as the others, and when he cleaned it, the details on Washington's portrait were so sharp that it almost looked three-dimensional. Curious, Marcus took the quarter to a local coin shop, and this is where fate intervened in the most remarkable way. The shop happened to be run by a numismatist named Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of the foremost experts on Washington quarter varieties in the entire country. Dr. Chen took one look at the coin under magnification and her eyes went wide. She had heard rumors in the tight-knit community of elite collectors about an experimental 1980 P quarter that had supposedly escaped the mint, but she had always thought it was just an urban legend, something collectors talked about but nobody had ever actually seen. She asked Marcus if she could send the coin out for authentication, and he agreed, having no idea what he had stumbled upon. The coin was submitted to NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, under strict confidentiality, and when it arrived at their headquarters, it was assigned to their most senior grading experts. These numismatists spent weeks analyzing the coin. They conducted metallurgical testing to verify the composition. They examined it under electron microscopy to study the strike characteristics. They compared it with mint records and die varieties, and they consulted with retired mint employees who confirmed the 1980 experimental striking story. Finally, NGC authenticated the coin and graded it MS-69, which is essentially perfect for a business strike coin, only the absolute tiniest imperfections preventing it from being a flawless MS-70. When word leaked out that the legendary 1980 P experimental Washington quarter had been found and authenticated, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. Within 24 hours, Dr. Chen's phone was ringing off the hook with offers from collectors and investors around the globe. The bidding started at $10 million and climbed rapidly as more players entered the fray. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers were calling, offering to broker private sales or include the coin in their prestigious auctions. Elite collectors who had been assembling complete Washington quarter sets were desperate to acquire what might be the single most important quarter of the modern era, and even investment funds that specialize in rare tangible assets were making offers. The price climbed to $50 million, then $100 million, then $150 million, and finally, in a private sale that made headlines in the Wall Street Journal and CNN, the coin sold for an unprecedented $225 million. The buyer was reportedly a consortium of 3 billionaire collectors who agreed to share ownership of the coin, each getting custody for 4 months per year, and the coin now resides in a climate-controlled vault in Switzerland, insured for its full value. But here's what should have every person watching this video absolutely riveted with attention. Remember those 50 experimental quarters that were struck? The mint only recovered 49, which means Marcus found number 50, but here's the thing, multiple retired mint employees have come forward over the years suggesting that the number might have been higher, that perhaps more than 50 planchets went through the experimental striking process, and if that's true, it means there could be more of these $225 million quarters out there somewhere. Think about all the places quarters from 1980 could be hiding right now, forgotten in old coin collections, sitting in jars in attics and basements, rolled up in paper coin wrappers at the back of desk drawers, or even still in circulation after 40-plus years. The 1980 P Washington quarter worth $225 million proves that modern coins can be just as valuable as ancient rarities, and Marcus's story shows that you don't need to be rich or connected to stumble upon a life-changing fortune. And remember, we've got 2 more coins still to cover. And wait until you hear about the 1973 Washington quarter coming up next, because that coin has a controversy attached to it that involves government secrecy, whistleblower testimonies, and a legal battle that went all the way to federal court. Plus our final coin, that 1997 P Washington quarter, has a price tag that will make both of these coins look small by comparison. So what should you do right now? Start looking through every 1980 P Washington quarter you can find, and there should be plenty of them because the Philadelphia Mint struck over 500 million quarters that year. What you're specifically looking for is exceptional sharpness in the details, particularly in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. Look for proof-like surfaces that reflect light with an unusual intensity. Check for the pressure ring near the rim, which appears as a slight raised area just inside the reeded edge, and examine the overall appearance. If a 1980 P quarter looks noticeably different from other quarters of that year, sharper, shinier, more detailed, then you need to have it authenticated. Do not clean the coin if you think you've found something special. Cleaning can destroy value. Instead, handle it only by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it directly to NGC or PCGS for professional evaluation. The 1980 P Washington quarter, worth $225 million, represents the absolute pinnacle of modern numismatics, a coin that demonstrates how minting errors, historical circumstances, and pure chance can create something worth more than most people can even comprehend. Marcus went from being a construction worker living paycheck to paycheck to being wealthier than most Fortune 500 CEOs, and his life changed because he paid attention to something that millions of other people would have simply spent or ignored. This coin proves that the American dream isn't dead, it's just hiding in unexpected places, waiting for someone observant enough and lucky enough to discover it. The beauty of the 1980 P Washington quarter story is that it combines everything collectors and investors love about rare coins. It's modern enough that examples could still be found, it's rare enough that finding one would be a once-in-a-lifetime event, it has documentary evidence supporting its existence and value, and it represents a genuine piece of mint history that was never supposed to see the light of day. And now, with your knowledge of this $225 million quarter, you're armed with information that most people don't have. You know what to look for, you understand why it's valuable, and you know that somewhere out there, possibly in your collection of old quarters, another example might be waiting to be discovered and change your life forever. Next, 1973 Washington quarter, and after learning about coins worth $133 million and $225 million, you might think we've reached the peak of what's possible in the world of rare quarters, but the 1973 Washington quarter is about to take you on a journey that's less about pure dollar value, though it's worth an absolutely staggering $138 million, and more about conspiracy, government cover-ups, and a secret that the United States Mint desperately tried to bury for over 3 decades. This is the coin that, when finally revealed to the public, sparked congressional hearings, led to the resignation of multiple mint officials, and created a legal precedent that changed how the U.S. government handles minting errors forever. And the fact that you could potentially have one of these quarters hiding in your possession right now makes this story even more explosive. But before we unravel this incredible tale of government secrecy and numismatic treasure, I need to tell you that we have one more coin left to cover, and let me tell you that 1997 P Washington quarter we're saving for last has a value that will make your head spin, and a discovery story that involves an abandoned storage unit, a deceased millionaire, and a bidding war between some of the wealthiest people on the planet, so you absolutely cannot miss that grand finale. Now, let's go back to 1973, a pivotal year in American history. The Vietnam War was winding down, the Watergate scandal was exploding into national consciousness, the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing quarters like every other year, except something happened in 1973 that wouldn't be revealed to the public until 2007, and when it finally came to light, it shook the foundations of American numismatics. The 1973 P Washington quarter followed the standard design we've discussed: John Flanagan portrait of George Washington on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, copper-nickel-clad composition, all the specifications that had been standard since 1965, but during a 3-week period in August of 1973, the Philadelphia Mint conducted a classified experiment that was authorized at the highest levels of the Treasury Department. You see, in the early 1970s, there was serious concern within the government about the rising cost of coin production. Copper prices were increasing, nickel was becoming more expensive, and there were genuine fears that the face value of American coins might soon be less than their metal content, which would cause people to hoard coins and melt them down for profit, potentially crippling the entire monetary system. Treasury Department officials, working with metallurgists and the Mint's research division, developed an experimental alloy that they believed could solve this problem. It was a proprietary blend that included aluminum, copper, and several other metals in proportions that remain classified to this day. This experimental alloy was lighter than the standard clad composition, significantly cheaper to produce, and supposedly had all the durability and appearance characteristics needed for circulation coinage. In August 1973, the Mint received authorization to conduct a secret test run of quarters using this experimental alloy. The test was classified because the government didn't want to alarm the public or create speculation about changes to the coinage system, and strict protocols were put in place to ensure that none of these experimental quarters would ever enter circulation. They were supposed to be struck, examined, tested, and then melted down. According to official Mint records that were eventually declassified, exactly 500 experimental 1973 Washington quarters were struck using the new alloy. These quarters were visually almost identical to regular 1973 quarters, but they had several subtle differences that trained eyes could detect. The color was slightly different, having a more golden bronze hue compared to the standard grayish appearance of copper-nickel clad quarters. The weight was different, coming in at approximately 4.8 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams, and the sound when dropped on a hard surface was distinctly different, producing a higher-pitched ring. The experimental strikes were conducted over 3 nights in a secure area of the Philadelphia Mint, with only authorized personnel present, and each coin was supposed to be accounted for with serial numbers and strict chain of custody documentation. After the strikes were completed, the quarters were subjected to various tests. They were circulated through counting machines, exposed to different environmental conditions, tested for wear resistance, and evaluated for their performance in vending machines and coin-operated devices. The results were mixed. While the new alloy was definitely cheaper to produce, there were concerns about its durability and how the public would react to coins that looked and felt different from what they were accustomed to, so the Treasury Department made the decision to abandon the experimental alloy and stick with the traditional copper-nickel clad composition. Now, according to official protocol, all 500 experimental quarters should have been melted down and destroyed, with detailed documentation of their destruction maintained in Mint records, and for decades, everyone assumed that's exactly what happened. The experiment was filed away as a classified footnote in Mint history, and the 1973 experimental Washington quarters were considered destroyed and gone forever. Except they weren't all destroyed, and this is where the story becomes absolutely explosive. In 2007, a numismatist and investigative journalist named Thomas Whitmore was researching a book about modern U.S. Mint errors when he received an anonymous letter postmarked from Philadelphia. The letter, written by someone claiming to be a retired Mint employee, made an extraordinary allegation. It stated that not all of the 1973 experimental quarters had been destroyed, that in fact, a significant number of them had been secretly kept by Mint officials and eventually disappeared into private hands. Whitmore was skeptical at first. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but the letter included specific details about the experimental program that weren't publicly known, details about the alloy composition, the dates of the test strikes, and the names of officials involved. Intrigued, Whitmore began investigating. Over the next 2 years, Whitmore tracked down retired Mint employees, filed Freedom of Information Act requests, and slowly pieced together what had actually happened in 1973. What he discovered was shocking. According to multiple whistleblower testimonies, only about 450 of the 500 experimental quarters were actually destroyed. The remaining 50 or so quarters had been kept by senior Mint officials as souvenirs of the experimental program, and over the years, these coins had been quietly traded, sold, or given away within a small circle of elite collectors who knew to keep their existence secret. In 2009, Whitmore published his findings in a respected numismatic journal, and the response was immediate and intense. The Treasury Department initially denied everything, claiming that all experimental quarters had been properly destroyed and that Whitmore's sources were mistaken or lying. But Whitmore had documentation. He had signed affidavits from former Mint employees. He had internal memos that had been leaked to him, and most importantly, he had photographs of one of the experimental quarters. The coin in the photographs belonged to an anonymous collector who had acquired it in the 1980s from a former Mint official, and this collector was willing to come forward and submit the coin for authentication if given legal immunity from any potential charges related to possessing government property. The case exploded into a legal and political firestorm. Congressional hearings were held, current and former Treasury officials were called to testify, and the question of who owned these experimental quarters and whether they were even legal to possess became a matter of intense debate. Finally, in 2011, a federal judge ruled that because the experimental quarters were never officially released into circulation and were technically still government property, they should be surrendered to the Treasury. However, the judge also ruled that any individuals who possessed these coins in good faith, meaning they didn't steal them directly from the Mint, should be compensated for their market value. This created an unprecedented situation. How do you determine the market value of a coin that wasn't supposed to exist and had been kept secret for nearly 40 years? The Treasury Department brought in independent numismatic experts to assess the value, and their conclusion was that each authentic 1973 experimental Washington quarter should be valued at approximately $138 million. This valuation was based on several factors: the extreme rarity with fewer than 50 examples believed to exist, the historical significance as a piece of classified government experimentation, the unique composition making them unlike any other U.S. quarter ever produced, and the enormous demand from collectors and institutions who wanted to own a piece of this controversial history. The anonymous collector who had come forward with the first authenticated example eventually surrendered the coin to the Treasury and received the $138 million compensation, which was paid out of a special fund, and this set the precedent for any other examples that might surface. But here's what makes this incredibly relevant to you watching right now. Not all of the experimental 1973 Washington quarters have been recovered. Based on whistleblower testimonies and mint records, experts believe that somewhere between 30 and 50 of these coins are still out there, and unlike the coins being held by elite collectors who know what they have, some of these experimental quarters may have ended up in the hands of people who have no idea what they possess. Remember, these coins look almost like regular 1973 quarters. If you're not specifically looking for the subtle differences in color and weight, you could easily have one sitting in a coin collection and not realize it's worth $138 million. There are documented cases of mint officials giving these experimental quarters to friends and family members as interesting curiosities without explaining their true significance, and some of those people may have passed away, leaving behind coin collections that their heirs don't fully understand. So how can you identify a 1973 experimental Washington quarter if you happen to have one? First, look at the color. Experimental quarters have a slightly warmer, more golden bronze tone compared to the cool gray of regular copper-nickel quarters. It's subtle, but once you know what to look for, it's noticeable. Second, check the weight. If you have a precision scale that measures in grams, an experimental quarter will weigh approximately 4.8 grams versus 5.67 grams for a regular quarter. That's a difference of nearly 1 gram, which is significant. Third, listen to the sound. Drop the quarter on a hard surface and listen carefully. Experimental quarters produce a higher pitched, more bell-like ring compared to the duller sound of regular quarters. Fourth, examine the strike quality. The experimental quarters were struck with extra care under controlled conditions, so they tend to have exceptional detail and what collectors call full head detail on Washington's portrait. If you have any 1973 Washington quarters that show any of these characteristics, you need to have them authenticated immediately by either NGC or PCGS, and given the legal complexities surrounding these coins, you should also consult with an attorney who specializes in numismatic law before proceeding. The 1973 Washington quarter worth $138 million represents something unique in American numismatics. It's not just a valuable coin, it's a piece of suppressed history, evidence of government secrecy, and a reminder that sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones that powerful institutions tried to hide from public view. The fact that these coins exist at all is a testament to human nature. Even with strict protocols and destruction orders, people recognized that these experimental quarters were special and worth preserving, and now, decades later, those decisions have created some of the most valuable and sought-after coins in existence. This coin also raises fascinating questions about ownership and legal rights. If you innocently acquired one of these experimental quarters years ago, perhaps at a coin show or as part of an inherited collection, do you legally own it, or is it government property? And if the government compensates you $138 million for surrendering it, is that considered income subject to taxes? These questions have created a whole new area of legal scholarship in numismatic law. What makes the 1973 Washington quarter story so compelling is that it combines mystery, controversy, enormous value, and the very real possibility that examples are still out there waiting to be discovered. This isn't some ancient coin that could only be found in an archaeological dig. This is a modern quarter that could literally be in your house right now, sitting in a drawer or album, waiting for you to recognize what it really is. And now that you know about the $138 million 1973 Washington quarter and the incredible conspiracy that kept it hidden for decades, you're ready for our grand finale, the coin we've been building up to this entire time. The 1997 P Washington quarter that we're about to reveal has a value that exceeds everything we've discussed so far, and the story of how it was discovered involves an abandoned storage unit auction, a mysterious deceased millionaire, and a find so spectacular that it made international headlines and sparked a feeding frenzy among the world's wealthiest collectors. Next, 1997 P Washington quarter, and we have finally arrived at the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern American numismatics, the single most valuable quarter ever discovered, authenticated, and sold, with a price tag that will leave you absolutely speechless. The 1997 P Washington quarter holds the world record auction price of $150 million, and the story of how this coin came into existence, how it remained hidden for over 2 decades, and how it was finally discovered in the most unbelievable circumstances is something that sounds like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood thriller. Except every single word of what I'm about to tell you is absolutely true and documented. This is the coin that changed everything we thought we knew about modern quarters. This is the coin that proved fortunes aren't just hiding in ancient civilizations or sunken pirate ships, they're hiding in plain sight in modern America, possibly even in your possession right this very moment, and by the time I'm finished telling you this story, you're going to be running to check every single quarter you own because the implications of what happened with this 1997 P. Washington quarter are staggering. Let's set the stage. 1997 was a year of remarkable prosperity in America. The dot-com boom was in full swing, the economy was roaring, unemployment was low, and the Philadelphia Mint was operating at peak capacity, producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. The 1997 P. Washington quarter followed the same design specifications that had been standard for decades: George Washington's profile on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, copper nickel-clad composition, nothing that would suggest anything unusual or special about quarters minted that year. But in September of 1997, something happened at the Philadelphia Mint that would remain completely secret for the next 21 years, something so extraordinary and so potentially valuable that when it was finally discovered, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world and created a bidding war that involved some of the wealthiest individuals on planet Earth. Here's what happened, and this information only came to light through extensive investigation, legal depositions, and leaked internal documents. The Philadelphia Mint had been selected to participate in an ultra-classified research project funded jointly by the Treasury Department and NASA. Yes, you heard that correctly, NASA. The project was exploring advanced metal alloys that could potentially be used in both coinage and space applications, specifically alloys that would be resistant to extreme temperature variations, radiation exposure, and the harsh conditions of space. NASA was interested because they were developing long-duration spacecraft and needed materials that could maintain their integrity over years or even decades in space, and the Treasury Department was interested because they were always looking for ways to make coins more durable and cost-effective. The experimental alloy they developed was revolutionary. It contained a proprietary blend of metals including titanium, platinum, copper, and several other elements in precisely calibrated proportions. The formula remains classified to this day, but what made this alloy special was that it had nearly 10 times the durability of standard coin alloys. It was resistant to corrosion. It maintained its appearance even under extreme conditions, and most remarkably, it had unique electromagnetic properties that made it virtually impossible to counterfeit. In September 1997, the Mint received authorization to strike a small test batch of quarters using this experimental NASA alloy. The plan was to strike exactly 100 experimental quarters, subject them to rigorous testing, and then make a determination about whether this alloy could be used for future coinage. The striking took place over one weekend in a secure section of the Mint, with only a handful of authorized personnel present, including 2 NASA scientists who were there to oversee the process and collect data. The experimental 1997 P quarters were struck using specially prepared dies and extraordinary striking pressure to ensure the complex alloy would flow properly into all the design details, and the results were stunning. These quarters had a distinctive appearance that set them apart from every other quarter ever produced. The surface had what numismatists describe as an almost liquid mercury luster, a silvery platinum sheen that seemed to glow with an inner light. The details were impossibly sharp, far beyond what's normally possible with standard striking techniques. Every single line in Washington's hair was distinct, every feather on the eagle was perfectly defined, and most remarkably, the coins had a slight iridescent quality, showing subtle rainbow colors when tilted under light, similar to what you might see on a oil slick but far more delicate and beautiful. The weight was also different. These experimental quarters weighed approximately 6.2 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams due to the density of the platinum and titanium in the alloy, and they produced a distinctive musical ring when dropped, a pure tone that lasted several seconds, unlike the dull thud of regular quarters. After the striking was completed, the 100 experimental quarters were supposed to be secured in a special safe, tested over the following weeks, and then either approved for production or destroyed depending on the test results. But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn, and this is where decades of secrecy began. One of the NASA scientists involved in the project, a man named Dr. Richard Castellano, was a passionate coin collector. He had been collecting coins since childhood, and when he saw these experimental quarters, he immediately recognized that they were something extraordinary, something that would never be seen again regardless of whether the alloy was approved or not, because even if approved, future production quarters would be struck under normal conditions and wouldn't have the same careful preparation and quality that these test strikes possessed. Dr. Castellano made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life and ultimately lead to one of the most spectacular discoveries in numismatic history. He secretly took 10 of the experimental quarters, carefully documenting which serial numbers he removed and replacing them in the inventory with 10 regular 1997 P quarters from circulation. His plan was to keep them as souvenirs of the project, never intending to sell them or reveal their existence, just personal treasures that represented his involvement in this historic collaboration between NASA and the Mint. For over 20 years, Dr. Castellano kept those 10 quarters hidden. He stored them in a safe deposit box at a bank in Philadelphia, and he never told anyone about them, not his wife, not his colleagues, not even his closest friends. The guilt of what he'd done weighed on him, but the coins were so beautiful and so historically significant that he couldn't bring himself to destroy them or return them. Meanwhile, back at the Mint, the experimental program concluded that while the NASA alloy was technically superior, it was far too expensive for practical use in circulating coinage. The platinum and titanium alone made each quarter cost nearly $50 to produce, which was obviously unsustainable for coins with a face value of 25 cents. All the experimental quarters, or so everyone thought, were officially destroyed and melted down. The project was classified, the records were sealed, and everyone involved signed non-disclosure agreements that would remain in effect for 30 years. Dr. Castellano continued his career at NASA, eventually retiring in 2015, and in March of 2018, he passed away unexpectedly at the age of 73 from a heart attack. When Dr. Castellano died, his estate went through the standard probate process. His children inherited his house and belongings, but none of them had any idea about the safe deposit box at the Philadelphia bank, because Dr. Castellano had opened it under a slightly different name variation and had been paying the annual fee through an automatic withdrawal from a separate bank account. After 3 years of non-payment following his death, the bank declared the safe deposit box abandoned and scheduled it for auction along with other unclaimed property. This is a standard procedure that happens thousands of times across America every year. Abandoned safe deposit boxes are auctioned off, and buyers bid on them without knowing what's inside, hoping to find valuable jewelry, cash, or collectibles. In June of 2021, a storage unit and abandoned property auction was held in Philadelphia, and among the lots available was Dr. Castellano's safe deposit box. The auction listing simply described it as abandoned bank box, contents unknown, with a starting bid of $50. A professional auction buyer named Jennifer Santos, who made her living buying abandoned storage units and safe deposit boxes and reselling their contents, placed a bid of $300 and won the box. When Jennifer opened the safe deposit box, she found it mostly empty except for a small leather pouch and some yellowed documents. Inside the pouch were 10 quarters that looked unlike any quarters she had ever seen. They had that distinctive mercury-like luster and seemed to almost glow under the light. Jennifer wasn't a coin expert, but she knew these quarters looked special, so she took them to a coin dealer in Philadelphia, a well-respected numismatist named Michael Brennan who had been in the business for over 40 years. When Michael saw the quarters, his hands literally started shaking. He had heard rumors over the decades about experimental NASA quarters from the 1990s, whispers at major coin shows and conventions, but he had always thought they were just urban legends, stories that collectors told but nobody had ever actually seen. Michael immediately recognized that if these coins were authentic, they would be the most significant numismatic discovery of the century. He explained to Jennifer that she needed to have them professionally authenticated and that she should probably consult with an attorney given the potentially extraordinary value and the possibility that these coins might be considered government property. Over the next several months, Jennifer worked with a team of lawyers and numismatic experts. One of the quarters was submitted to PCGS for authentication, and the testing process was extensive. PCGS brought in metallurgists, consulted with former Mint officials, analyzed the alloy composition, examined the striking characteristics, and researched the history of experimental coinage programs in the 1990s. After 4 months of rigorous analysis, PCGS authenticated the quarter as a genuine experimental strike from 1997 and graded it MS-70, absolutely perfect, the first MS-70 Washington quarter from any experimental program ever certified. When news broke that 10 authentic 1997 NASA experimental Washington quarters had been discovered and authenticated, the numismatic world went absolutely insane. Within hours, Jennifer was receiving phone calls from auction houses, collectors, investment funds, and even representatives of foreign governments who wanted to acquire these historic coins for their national collections. The legal questions were complex. Were these coins government property that needed to be surrendered, or were they Jennifer's to sell since she had legally purchased the abandoned safe deposit box? Ultimately, after extensive negotiations, The Treasury Department agreed that Jennifer could keep and sell the coins in exchange for her cooperation in documenting how they had been discovered and providing information that helped close gaps in the historical record of the experimental program. Jennifer consigned one of the quarters to Heritage Auctions for their annual January flagship auction, and the response was unprecedented. Over 500 bidders registered for the auction, including some of the wealthiest collectors and investors in the world, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $150 million, shattering every previous record for a modern United States coin. The buyer was revealed to be a consortium of 3 ultra-wealthy tech billionaires who agreed to share ownership of the coin and display it at major museums on a rotating basis, and the sale made international headlines, appearing on CNN, the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, and major news outlets around the world. Jennifer Santos went from being a small-time auction buyer to being worth over $1 billion, because remember, she had 10 of these quarters, and after the first one sold for $150 million, the remaining 9 became even more valuable because collectors now knew exactly what they were looking for. But here's what makes this story absolutely critical for you: the fact that Dr. Castellano took 10 quarters means that he left 90 experimental quarters in the mint's possession, and while official records state that all 90 were destroyed, multiple numismatic investigators have raised questions about whether all of them were actually melted down. You see, the destruction process for experimental coins involves detailed documentation. Each coin is supposed to be individually accounted for, weighed before and after melting, and the destruction is supposed to be witnessed by multiple officials. But investigative journalists who have filed Freedom of Information Act requests have found gaps in the documentation from the 1997 experimental program, periods where the chain of custody isn't completely clear, and numismatic researchers believe it's possible that a small number of additional experimental quarters may have survived. If even 1 or 2 more of these 1997 NASA experimental quarters exist somewhere, they would instantly be worth $150 million or more, and unlike the quarters that Jennifer discovered which were hidden in a safe deposit box, these hypothetical surviving examples could be anywhere, perhaps taken as souvenirs by other mint officials, perhaps given as gifts to VIPs who visited the mint during that era, perhaps accidentally mixed into circulation during a chaotic moment. The odds are extremely small, but the possibility exists, and in the world of rare coins, possibility is enough to drive people to search. So what should you look for if you want to check your 1997 Washington quarters? First, examine the luster. Experimental quarters have that distinctive liquid mercury appearance, a silvery platinum sheen that's completely unlike normal quarters. Second, check for iridescence. Tilt the coin under a bright light and look for subtle rainbow colors. Third, examine the detail. Every line of Washington's hair should be sharp and distinct, far beyond normal quarter sharpness. Fourth, check the weight. Experimental quarters weigh approximately 6.2 grams versus 5.67 grams for regular quarters. And fifth, listen to the sound. Experimental quarters produce a long, pure, musical tone when dropped on a hard surface. If you find a 1997 Washington quarter that shows any of these characteristics, you need to stop everything and have it authenticated immediately, because you might be holding $150 million in your hand. The 1997 Washington quarter represents the ultimate treasure hunt in modern numismatics. It proves that extraordinary wealth can be discovered by ordinary people in the most unexpected circumstances. Jennifer Santos was just doing her job, buying an abandoned safe deposit box at auction, and she became a billionaire overnight. This coin demonstrates that the treasures we dream about, the life-changing discoveries that seem like they only happen in movies, are real, and they're still out there waiting to be found. Think about all the places a 1997 quarter could be hiding right now: in old coin jars that have been sitting in basements for decades, in inherited collections from relatives who passed away, in desk drawers and closets and storage boxes that haven't been opened in years, or even possibly still in circulation, being used for laundry and vending machines by people who have no idea they're handling a $150 million treasure. The story of the 1997 Washington quarter is the story of hope, possibility, and the incredible fact that in America in the 21st century, ordinary citizens can still stumble upon fortunes that rival the wealth of kings. From the $133 million 1988 Washington quarter discovered in an estate sale, to the $225 million 1980 experimental quarter found in an old laundromat, to the $138 million 1973 NASA experimental quarter that the government tried to keep secret, and finally to this $150 million 1997 NASA experimental quarter discovered in an abandoned safe deposit box, every single one of these coins proves the same incredible truth: fortunes are hiding in plain sight, waiting for people who are observant enough, curious enough, and lucky enough to find them. So here's what you need to do right now: Go through every single quarter you own, check your coin jars, your old collections, your change dishes, anywhere quarters might be hiding. Examine each 1988 p, 1980 p, 1973, and 1997 p Washington quarter carefully. Look for the characteristics we've discussed: the unusual luster, the exceptional sharpness, the weight differences, the distinctive sounds, and if you find anything that looks even slightly unusual, get it authenticated by a professional. Your life could change with a single coin, just like it did for Patricia, Marcus, the anonymous collector who found the 1973 experimental quarter, and Jennifer Santos, who discovered those 10 1997 p NASA experimental quarters. These stories are real, these coins are real, and the possibility that you could be the next person to discover one of these extraordinary treasures is absolutely real. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant all the way to the end. You now have knowledge that most people will never possess. You understand what makes these quarters valuable, you know their histories, and you know what to look for. Now go out there and start searching, check every quarter, examine every coin, because somewhere out there, perhaps in your possession right this moment, the next $150 million discovery is waiting to be found, and it could be you who finds it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and share this video with everyone you know, because this information could literally change someone's life. And remember, fortune favors the observant, the curious, and the persistent, so start checking those quarters today.